All right, this one's gonna be a fun one today. We're gonna do a speed round video of your guys' questions, things that you've sent in via social media, email, what have you. And the topics are gonna be broad here. And I'm gonna give my best take in a certain amount of time and try to knock out as many as we can. Now, the topics range from how to deal with a head strength coach or sport coach who's a little bit outdated with their methods or maybe stubborn. We have some folks that wanna know about strength training for endurance athletes, people that wanna know more about career development, how they can get into speaking, a lot of ones that how to deal with difficult athletes or professionals, the best resources on trying to stay with the current research. So here we go. Bear with me. It's a Sunday afternoon and I'm bound to sweat because it's hot out here in Georgia, but I'm going to knock these out. All right, so the first one, best resources to keep current with research. And I understand how overwhelming this can be. One thing you have to understand is that it's really important for us to stay curious, but the best thing you can do with research, before I even talk about resources, is you've got to make sure that you're applying what you learn. The problem is so many coaches have issues with information overload because all they do is read and more research, but they're not actually going out there and trying it or applying it to see if that actually works. And we have a big issue in strength and conditioning with people thinking they've got to go down these rabbit holes when in reality, some of the research they're reading doesn't apply to their population. For example, an 8-year-old should not be doing any kind of French contrast training. But a lot of times coaches aren't out there practicing these methods themselves. They're not testing it, so they feel like I need more and more and more. So make sure that before you worry about where your research is coming from, think about, is it applicable? Is it something I need right now? Is it something I'm struggling with? And can I even deliver that to my population? Now, when you're looking at research sources or journals, you want to think not only locally, so whether it deals with biomechanics or the Journal of Strength and Conditioning, but you also want to think global. Make sure that you're looking at psychology journals. Make sure that you're looking at nutrition journals. I mean, all of these areas have different governing bodies that give you this information. There's also some great resources out there now that will consolidate research for you, kind of like a quarterly, or they'll even do it monthly, where they've hired people now that say, hey, we're going to give you the best in terms of coaching science. We're going to give you the best, or at least what we think is the best in regards to training, nutrition, and you can consolidate that. And I'll put some links for some decent ones below. Also, if you're having trouble getting access to full text research, you can always go to places like ResearchGate. You'd be surprised at how much information you can find out there. And I hear that complaint a lot. Well, I have no trouble getting research, but I can only find abstracts, or you got to pay for it. And I get that. It is super frustrating. There's a lot of gatekeeping with information, but things like ResearchGate can be absolutely phenomenal, as can reaching out to other people in the field and asking to do kind of a literature exchange. Maybe you have a lot of information on multi-directional speed and the person you're reaching out to is really locked in with strength and power. So offer them something. Say, hey, coach, I really respect the work you're doing in this capacity. I'm looking to learn more. Would you mind sharing what research you have? And I'm happy to give you some of mine as well. Remember, reciprocity is key. So make sure it's applied. Don't get caught up in chasing everything that's out there. And then make sure that you're seeking out the full text and that you're offering reciprocity and looking at networking across to see who may have access to these resources. Another person asked, Coach, how do I deal or communicate with stagnant direct supervisors that may be a source of burnout? Now, we've talked about dealing with difficult athletes in the past on this channel, so make sure you check out that video because a lot of that coincides with dealing with difficult personalities or archetypes in general. Remember, when you're dealing with somebody that you perceive to be difficult, you have to ask yourself, what am I even defining as difficult? Isolate those behaviors. What are they doing? Are they not listening? Are they not giving you access to certain resources you need to do your job? Do they just not believe that they should take others' opinions into consideration to begin with? Are they doing something that's actually verbally abusive on the job? But you need to identify what difficult means to you. After that, again, it's a process of trying to ask them the right questions so that you can get a little bit more clarity about what makes them tick. And to get people to open up, I'm always a big advocate of making them feel comfortable. That can be going on their own turf. Maybe you train together, maybe you buy them lunch or a cup of coffee, but you find some way to get out of your immediate work environment where you can get to know that person a little bit more on a personal level and listen to them. But so much of dealing with difficult athletes or personalities or supervisors comes down to your ability to get to know them better so that you can be more relatable and make sure they don't feel threatened by what you're asking or what you're suggesting. Remember, people have this ingrained defense mechanism, right? Our brain has evolved a certain way that when somebody questions us, or when somebody, even if they're asking why we do something a certain way, that form of questioning, people tend to clam up. You have to make sure that you're approaching them in a way that they don't feel threatened and in a way that really coincides with their level of comfort to get them to open up. All right, next question. This is a good one. Acumen Athletics asked pros and cons of being an athlete's friend. Now this one is tricky as well because it'll depend on the context, but I have to say this first and foremost. Your job as a coach is not to be somebody's friend. Your job is to be their guide. Right? And you have to understand that, I don't want to seem hypocritical because at my wedding, I had some athletes that I worked with 6, 8, 10 years at that wedding, and I consider them to be friends. But when we were in the workplace, that is a completely different separation. And these athletes were in their late 20s, early 30s. There's a different aspect there, right? If you're working with youth athletes and high school athletes, I shouldn't need to tell you about the importance of keeping that professional barrier, right? Like you want them to feel comfortable, you want them to trust you, but ethically, these are people that at the end of the day need to respect you. And the minute you start to blur those lines, you have to start asking yourself why. Why is it important that you come off as their friend? Are you just wanting to be liked? Because that's not your job as a coach either. Sometimes a coach, you have to teach them the hard lessons. You have to tell these folks things that they may not want to hear. So you're not always going to be a friend. Now, does that mean if you're working with an athlete and let's say they're having a birthday party and this athlete is 22 years old and there's other members of the administration present and maybe it's a farewell, well, that's context dependent as well. But should you be spending time with athletes outside of what you're doing at bars and social events and gatherings? Generally, the answer is no. Every workplace is going to have its own work rules, context, and you need to make sure that you're adhering to that. You need to make sure that you defer to your supervisor. You need to make sure that you're always in communication with the superiors and people in charge, because overstepping, I just don't get what good is going to come of that result. You don't need to be their friend per se for them to listen to you. You just need to bring value to their life and be a great educator. All right. The problem with youth sports. This is a great question as well, but one we addressed on another video, so I'm going to be brief and encourage you to watch that video. The primary problem with youth sports right now is this overemphasis on early specialization, getting athletes to just play their sport and doing that year round. You're seeing athletes that won't even get involved in any form of physical preparation or strength and conditioning. They're doing soccer practice, then soccer games, then soccer tournaments, then soccer showcases. And the research makes it clear that that level of over-specialization, that inability to allow these athletes to expand their motor skills and other things and strength levels is really increasing the injury rates of our field. So I can't focus, or I can't make this a point enough, that you've got to let kids play. They've got to participate in other activities that aren't related to their direct sport. And I'd encourage you to absolutely watch that other video. All right, some other great questions here. Coach, I'd really like to get into speaking. I go to a lot of conferences, and it's something that I really feel I want to do to contribute to the field. How can I do this? Now, this is a phenomenal question. I think that teaching gives you the opportunity to learn twice. There are a lot of strength coaches that will read books and research, but very rarely do they put themselves in a position to have to teach that to someone else. And Einstein said it best: if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it well enough yourself. Guys, it's a big reason I do these videos, right? It makes me have to learn things at a deeper level, because now I'm putting myself out there in front of the world to share that information. Now, I reserve the right to be wrong, and we're all going to be wrong at times. But the important thing is that you don't just absorb the information, but that you also figure out how to translate it to a wider demographic, because now you've got to understand the intricacies and the context at a deeper level. So if you want to speak, you have to, again, first identify, what do I want to speak on? And is this something I actually have experience in? For a long time, I didn't speak at all because I knew I just needed to coach, and I needed to coach a wide variety of athletes, and I needed to build that skill set. I mean, how silly would it be for me to start a company called The Art of Coaching if I've never had to work with a large demographic of athletes from youth to professional and Olympic and tactical? So make sure that you have actual experience and true skills in that setting or knowledge in it if you're a researcher as well. Second, you have to identify, all right, now that I'm going to do this, is this a crowded market? Am I going to be speaking about speed, despite the fact that most conferences I go to, 30 other people seem to speak about speed? If so, okay, well then what else are you bringing to the table? Because I've been in this field 13 years at the time of recording this video, and while there's always more to learn, I'm not going to keep going to just speed presentations on speed or programming over time. I'm going to kind of know that there's certain avenues that I trust and relate to, and I'm still going to be open to other people's opinions and new research. But we already see so much of that stuff that you just want to make sure that you're not flooding the market. And then finally, you have to ask yourself, how are you going to get the message out there? You need to start a website. If you want to speak, people need to know that you're speaking. How are you advertising that? Are you doing that on social media? How am I supposed to know if I'm having a conference that, one, you have a particular skill set, and two, that you're speaking on it, and three, that you're good at it? So make sure you have testimonials, have videos. If you go to my personal website, brettbartholomew.net, you'll see that I have sample videos of me speaking. I have a speaking request form where I can learn more about the folks that want to have me out. And then I've also created 10 to 15 different presentations that I can speak on so I can adapt to their audience and hopefully bring something new. All right, we're going to do one more, and we're going to do a lot of these videos in the future, so stay with me. All right, this question we have: hi, coach, I'd love to hear about recovery, specifically supplements, nutrition, sleep, etc. Now, this one's interesting, specifically because we tend to go the quick route for this. Let me talk about supplements first. When you're working with athletes, and even when you're working with general population, when you're working with people, you need to have a food-first approach. Supplements should be in addition to one's normal diet or daily eating routine. Meaning, if you're not eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, if you're not fueling regularly, and instead you're trying to take all these supplements like pre-workout and post-workout and all, you're getting that concept wrong. So make sure, are you eating real food first? Second, you need to make sure if you are taking supplements, everything is NSF approved and informed choice approved. That means that the supplement itself, from the creation of it to the distribution of it, has been checked and inspected and tested to be free of any banned substances. Again, that's NSF approved by sport. You can check the link at the bottom. There's a company that I work with that meets all those standards, and you've got to make sure you have that, because otherwise you never know what's in those supplements because they're not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. Water, I'll keep this simple. You're probably not drinking enough. There are a lot of different recommendations based on how much you should drink per pound of body weight. Remember, that's going to vary based on your genetics, how much you sweat, the nature and length of the activity that you're doing, the ambient temperature outside. You're going to lose some more fluid in a humid environment, and that's going to differ from a dry environment and temperature changes. So you have to be careful of somebody saying this is exactly how much water you should drink, because it's contingent on all these external variables. While I'm speaking right now, I'm in the middle of Georgia in the summer. I am sweating. My hydration needs are going to be different than if I was out here and it was 42 degrees Fahrenheit, or if it was, even if it was like, let's look at 10 degrees Celsius. So you've got to pay attention to that. Now, sleep. This is another interesting piece. Everybody will swear you need 8 hours. This also depends. Kids are going to need more than older adults. Not everybody's going to need 8 hours. There are different what are called chronotypes. There are people that tend to do better as early morning risers, and there are other people called owls. The first larks are the early birds. They're the people that tend to do well really early in the day. They hit this circadian dip, and then they'll have another little rise in energy a little bit, maybe mid-afternoon. There are owls. I'm an owl. Even though I tend to get up early, I am much more of a late night person. And what's ironic about this is for as many videos and people say that, oh, the early bird gets the worm and it's best to wake up and work out early and do all this, that's actually fairly counterintuitive. You'll find if you go to most gyms at 5 or 6 in the morning, the parking lot's packed. Whereas if you go at about 9 o'clock at night, definitely it's much quieter. So I've always been somebody, what's worked for me, and this is because I tend to get a lot of energy after 9 p.m., is I actually train at night. If I can't train between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., I'll train at night. That's what works for me. It has no impact on my sleep. As a matter of fact, I sleep better and I'm able to do that. And then there's this third bird chronotype. And these are people that kind of sit in the middle between a morning person and a late night person. What you have to understand is it's not what is best, it's what's best for you. It is not about time of day, it is about timing. You have to figure out what works with your family responsibilities, with your job, with your sport. And so when we try to force people into these buckets, let's say you're trying to force somebody to train at 5 a.m., even though there's other options, but you're trying to force them into being a morning person, that's not always gonna work. And there is research to support that heavy loading of the spine, such as squats and deadlifts, is not advantageous that early in the morning after we've been laying down for so long. Guys, this is the rapid fire session, the first one that we've ever done. If you like this, make sure to keep the questions and comments coming. I'll be sure to even read your comments at the bottom of this video and the next one. So make sure to click and subscribe. I appreciate all the great interaction, and hopefully this is helping.